Hey everybody, this video is to show you how I do milestones for rocks. So in sessions, we talk a lot about getting rocks done, and then if they don't get done, why is that? And I've mentioned to lots of clients that I don't know how people do it without milestones. And so I wanted to walk you through exactly what does that mean and how do I do that? So what you see on your screen here, these are the live rocks that I have for this quarter. And so as you can see, the rocks are on the top. So I have 6 rocks. And then the dates for each of our level 10 meetings are down the side here. And then each of the steps that needs to happen for each one of these rocks is in these columns. Now, if you're using EOS software, the softwares can all do milestones, and you can put stuff in there and then track which milestones are due when. I think that's really cumbersome, and I don't like the way that they do it. I really like being able to just see it all in a grid like this. And so when I do a level 10 with Allison, and it is July 17th, and we're doing our level 10, and I'm reporting on track or off track for rocks, it's not me just saying, well, yeah, I think that's on track, or I don't think it is. I'm literally going and saying, okay, well, by the 17th, I'm supposed to have the planning is supposed to be scheduled for that one. Okay, that one's done. Okay, this one, yep, I've got that thing done. The punch list, yep, I've got more than 3 things done there. And if I've done everything in that row, then the rock is on track. And if I haven't, then I report the rock being off track, and we IDS from that standpoint. Now, a couple things on this. One is that the way that you set up your rock milestones usually is not the way that the execution of the rock actually goes. So I don't want you to freak out about that. It's relatively normal to get halfway through a rock and discover you got to rejigger stuff, and that's totally fine. This is a tool for you to get it done. So if you get in the middle of it and you discover, well, the milestones that I set didn't work, that's fine. Change the milestones. That's totally fine. We're like with a rock, we set the rock and we don't mess with it all quarter. The milestones, mess with them as much as you need in order to make sure that it's helpful for you. Now, obviously, if you just mess with the milestones and just keep changing them so that you can be on track, well, that's going to backfire. But feel free to change them in the middle of the quarter if what you've discovered, if you discover that what you're doing isn't helpful. So with each of these, what's up at the top is the official, like this is the full text of the rock. So I've got a punch list for the session room, and 25 items on it have been completed. So there's a separate document called the punch list, and there's probably 40 things on there. And Allison and I said, well, it's not reasonable to expect that all of them are going to be done this quarter. So how are we going to do that? And we settled on doing 25. And so on a different document, we've got 25 items that we identified in bold. And as I'm doing, I'm just checking them off here. You can see that I've got 3 different rocks that are like a number that gets done every time. That's not normal to have half of my rocks be tracked that way. Usually they're tracked more like these other 3 where there's just here's the steps, here's the steps, here's the steps. Now, where do you get to these steps and how do you do that? And so I want to show you exactly what I do to get here. Do not overcomplicate this, but let's say I've got a rock that says create new sales brochure. So what I do is exactly this. I say, okay, well, what do I need to do to create a new sales brochure? And sometimes it's very clear. I need to do step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What's more normal is it's not entirely clear. And what can be really helpful is to think about the first step and the last step. Okay, well, when the new sales brochure, what's the very last step? Well, okay, I have to have the brochure, let's spell it right, brochure in hand. All right, cool. That's the very last thing. Okay, well, what's the very first thing? Well, I've probably got to get budget approval. So let's say I got to get budget approval from the integrator. Okay. All right. Well, what do I do after I get budget approval? I'm not really that's complicated, but here's an easy one. What do I have to do before I get the brochure in hand? Well, I've got to send it to the printer. Okay, so send it to the printer, they do their thing, then I get the brochure in hand. Okay, well, before I can send it to the printer, I need to get the final approval on the design. Okay, cool. Well, before I get final approval on the design, what has to happen there? Not really sure. Well, let's go back up here to the top then. And I just kind of bounce back and forth here. Okay, well, if I'm going to get final budget approval from the integrator, after that, what do I do? Well, then I got to select a vendor. Okay, well, I have to meet with some vendors first. So We're going to say meet with 3 vendors. Great. And then what do I have to do? I have to select a vendor. And then after I select a vendor, I have to get a quote from the vendor. Let's spell that right. From the vendor. And then after I get the quote from the vendor, I have to approve the quote. And then after I approve the quote, then what happens? Then they have to do the initial design. And then we've got to do refinements. And then, let's spell that right. And after we do refinements, we have to get delivery of final design. And then, yeah, actually, look at that. So after the delivery of the final design, then I would get final design approval from the marketing team. Okay, so there are these steps that have to happen. Now, let's look at the weeks and see when these can all happen. Well, the brochure in hand technically isn't due till the 18th, but I want to give myself just a little bit of grace there. So let's say the brochure is going to be in hand by the 11th, and the printer, they say they can get things done in 3 days, but let's just assume the printer is going to take 2 weeks. So the printer, I got to send it to the printer by the 21st. Well, I can get budget approval from the integrator next week, so that's not a problem. And then meeting with 3 vendors, that might take a while because I got everything scheduled. So let's say that I'm going to meet with all 3 vendors by here, and maybe it gets done faster than that, but for sure by then. And you know what? By the time I meet with the 3 vendors, I can select a vendor, so that's not a problem. So I'm going to say that that happens in the same week. And then after I select a vendor, I've got to get a quote from the vendor, and that should be able to, honestly, you know what, that should happen that same week. There's no reason those can't all happen. So I get a quote from the vendor, and then approval. And I happen to know that the finance person's on vacation that week, and so approval isn't going to be able to happen until the next week. So I get the approval to approve of the quote, and then I get initial, let's spell this right. So the initial design, and that's okay. And then the initial design and the refinements probably can't happen to next week. Okay, well, let's see. Shoot, now I'm bunched up against a deadline here. I guess I'm not going to be able to give myself quite as much wiggle room. So we're going to say the brochure is in hand there, and we're going to say that we're going to send it to the printer the week before. So we've done the refinements, and then we've got to we can do delivery and final approval in the same week. So then let's go delivery and final approval here. And if we do that, then there's no reason that we can't send it to the printer the same time. So you know what, let's do this then. So then we'll say we're going to send it to the printer at this same time, and then the printer hopefully goes faster, but we'll say it's like this. Okay, and that's literally what I do for each one of my rocks. So I know then, all right, well, on the 24th, I need to be able to say I've got budget approval. Oh, and then when I do these things, I just go in and, oh, crap. That screenshot or that keystroke does a strikeout in Google, except that I'm recording, and so it does something different. So never mind on that. But I go in here and I do a strike through on this just to mark it's done. And then on the 24th, if I've gotten a budget approval and I've met with 3 vendors and I've selected a vendor and I've got a quote from a vendor, then I'm on track. And if I haven't done those things, then I'm off track. So that is exactly how this works. If you would like help doing this, like in terms of building it out like this, let me know, and I'm happy to walk you through that and work with you on kind of getting your feet under you with creating milestones for rocks. If not, go for it. And as always, reach out. Let me know if you have any questions or anything I can do to help. Thanks, everybody.